This recording is in the public domain. Section 9 of the Legends of the Jews, Volume 3, by Louis Ginzberg. Israel received 3 gifts during their wanderings through the desert: the well, the clouds of glory, and the manna. The first for the merits of Miriam, the second for those of Aaron, and the third for those of Moses. When Miriam died, the well disappeared for a time, but it reappeared as a reward for the merits of Aaron and Moses. When Aaron dies, the clouds of glory disappeared for a time, but reappeared owing to the merits of Moses. But when the last named died, the well, the clouds of glory, and the manna disappeared forever. Throughout 40 years, however, manna served them not only as food, but also as provender for their cattle, for the dew that preceded the fall of manna during the night brought grain for their cattle. Manna also replaced perfume for them, for it shed an excellent fragrance upon those who ate of it. In spite of all the excellent qualities of manna, they were not satisfied with it, and demanded that Moses and Aaron give them flesh to eat. These replied, "We might put up with you if you murmured only against us, but you murmur against the Eternal. Come forward, that you may hear the judgment of God." At once God appeared to Moses and said to him, "It is revealed to me what the congregation of Israel have said and what they will say, but tell them this: You have demanded 2 things. You have desired bread, and I gave it to you, because man cannot exist without it. But now, filled to satiety, you demand flesh. This also will I give you, so that you might not say, if your wish were denied, God cannot grant it. But at some future time you shall make atonement for it. I am a judge, and shall assign punishment for this." In the meantime, however, God granted their wish, and toward evening thick swarms of quails came up from the sea and covered the whole camp, taking their flight quite low, not 2 ells above the ground, so that they might be easily caught. Contrary to the manna, which fell in the morning, the quails did not come before evenfall. With a radiant countenance God gave them the former, as their desire for bread was justified, but with a darkened mien under cover of night he sent quails. Now, because the one food came in the morning and the second in the evening, Moses instituted the custom among his people of taking 2 meals a day, one in the morning and one in the evening, and he set the meal with the use of meat for the evening. At the same time he taught them the prayer in which they were to offer thanks after eating manna, which read, "Blessed be thou, O God our Lord, King of the world, who in thy bounty dost provide for all the world, who in thy grace, goodwill, and mercy dost grant food to every creature, for thy grace is everlasting. Thanks to thy bounty we have never lacked food, nor ever shall lack it, for thy great name's sake. For thou suppliest and providest for all. Thou art bountiful, and nourishest all thy creatures which thou hast made. Blessed be thou, O God, that dost provide for all." Section 10 of the Legends of the Jews, Volume 3, by Louis Ginzberg. Miriam's well. Relieved as they were of all the cares of subsistence through the gift of manna, it was plainly the duty of the Israelites to devote themselves exclusively to the study of the Torah. When, therefore, they slackened in the performance of this duty, punishment in the form of lack of water immediately overtook them. This was the first time that they actually experienced this want, for at Marah, nothing more than alarm that this need might come upon them had caused them to murmur and complain. In their distress they once more unreasonably cast reproaches upon their leader and disputed with him, saying, "Wherefore is this, children, that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst?" Moses replied, "As often as you quarrel with me, you tempt God. But God performeth wonders and excellent deeds for you as often as you dispute with me, that his name may sound in glory throughout the world." In spite of the injury they had done him, Moses prayed to God that he might aid them in their distress and also stand by him. "O Lord of the world," said he, "I am surely doomed to die. Thou biddest me not to be offended with them, but if I obey thy words, I shall certainly be killed by them." God, however, replied, "Try thou to act like me. As I return good for evil, so do thou return to them good for evil, and forgive their trespass. Go on before the people, and we shall see who dares touch thee." Hardly had Moses shown himself to the people when all of them rose reverently from their seats, whereupon God said to Moses, "How often have I told thee not to be angry with them, but to lead them, as a shepherd leads his flock? It is for their sake that I have set thee on this height, and only for their sake wilt thou find grace, goodwill, and mercy in my sight." Then God bade him go with some elders to the rock on Horeb and fetch water out of it. The elders were to accompany him there, that they might be convinced that he was not bringing water from a well, but smiting it from a rock. To accomplish this miracle, God bade him smite the rock with his rod, as the people labored under the impression that this rod could only bring destruction, for through its agency Moses had brought the 10 plagues upon the Egyptians in Egypt and at the Red Sea. Now they were to see that it could work good also. Upon God's bidding, Moses told the people to choose from which rock they wished water to flow. And hardly had Moses touched with his sapphire rod the rock which they had chosen, when plenteous water flowed from it. The spot where this occurred God called Massa and Meribah, because Israel had there tried their God, saying, "If God is Lord over all, as over us, if he satisfies our needs and will further show us that he knows our thoughts, then we will serve him, but not otherwise." The water that flowed for them on this spot served not only as a relief for their present need, but on this occasion there was revealed to them a well of water which did not abandon them in all their 40 years' wandering, but accompanied them on all their marches. God wrought this great miracle for the merits of the prophetess Miriam, wherefore also it was called Miriam's well. But his well dates back to the beginning of the world, for God created it on the 2nd day of the creation, and at one time it was in the possession of Abraham. It was this same well that Abraham demanded back from Abimelech, king of the Philistines, after the king's servants had violently taken it away. But when Abimelech pretended not to know anything about it, saying, "I wot not who hath done this thing," Abraham said, "Thou and I will send sheep to the well, and he shall be declared the rightful owner of the well, for whose sheep the water will spout forth to water them. And," continued Abraham, "from that same well shall the 7th generation after me, the wanderers in the desert, draw their supply." This well was in the shape of a sieve-like rock, out of which water gushes forth as from a spout. It followed them on all their wanderings, up hill and down dale, and wherever they halted, it halted too, and it settled opposite the tabernacle. Thereupon the leaders of the 12 tribes would appear, each with his staff, and chant these words to the well: "Spring up, O well, sing ye unto it. Nobles of the people digged it by the direction of the lawgiver with their staves." Then the water would gush forth from the depths of the well, and shoot up high as pillars, then discharge itself into great streams that were navigable, and on these rivers the Jews sailed to the ocean, and hauled all the treasures of the world therefrom. The different parts of the camp were separated by these rivers, so that women visiting each other were obliged to make use of ships. Then the water discharged itself beyond the encampment, where it surrounded a great plain in which grew every conceivable kind of plant and tree. And these trees, owing to the miraculous water, daily bore fresh fruits. This well brought fragrant herbs with it, so that the women had no need of perfumes on the march, for the herbs they gathered served this purpose. This well furthermore threw down soft, fragrant kinds of grass that served as pleasant couches for the poor, who had no pillows or bedclothes. Upon the entrance to the Holy Land, this well disappeared, and was hidden in a certain spot of the Sea of Tiberias. Standing upon Carmel and looking over the sea, one can notice there is a sieve-like rock, and that is the well of Miriam. Once upon a time it happened that a leper bathed at this place of the Sea of Tiberias, and hardly had he come in contact with the waters of Miriam's well when he was instantly healed.
Section 80 of the Legends of the Jews, Volume 3, by Louis Ginzberg. Korah's rebellion took place during Israel's sojourn in Kadesh Barnea, whence a short time before the spies had been sent out. They remained in this place during 19 years, and then for as long a time wandered ceaselessly from place to place through the desert. When at last the time decreed by God for their stay in the wilderness was over, and the generation that God had said must die in the desert had paid its penalty for its sin, they returned again to Kadesh Barnea. They took delight in this place, endeared to them by long years of habitation, and settled down in the expectation of a cheerful and agreeable time. But the prophetess Miriam now dies, and the loss of the woman, who occupied a place as high as that of her brothers Moses and Aaron, at once became evident in a way that was perceived by the pious as well as by the godless. She was the only woman who died during the march through the desert, and this occurred for the following reasons. She was a leader of the people, together with her brothers, and as these two were not permitted to lead the people into the promised land, she had to share their fate. The well, furthermore, that had provided Israel with water during the march through the desert, had been a gift of God to the people as a reward for the good deeds of this prophetess, and as this gift had been limited to the time of the march through the desert, she had to die shortly before the entrance into the promised land. Hardly had Miriam died when the well also disappeared, and a dearth of water set in. That all Israel might know that only owing to the merits of the pious prophetess had they been spared a lack of water during the 40 years of the march. While Moses and Aaron were now plunged in deep grief for their sister's death, a mob of the people collected to wrangle with them on account of the dearth of water. Moses, seeing the multitudes of people approaching from the distance, said to his brother Aaron, "What may all these multitudes desire?" The other replied, "Are not the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob kind-hearted people, and the descendants of kind-hearted people? They come to express their sympathy." Moses, however, said, "They are not able to distinguish between a well-ordered procession and this motley multitude. Were these people assembled in an orderly procession, they would move under the leadership of the rules of thousands and the rulers of hundreds. But behold, they move in disorderly troops. How, then, can their intentions be to console with us?" The two brothers were not long to remain in doubt concerning the purpose of the multitude, for they stepped up to them and began to pick a quarrel with Moses, saying, "It was a heavy blow for us when 14,700 of our men died of the plague. Harder still to bear was the death of those who were swallowed up by the earth and lost their lives in an unnatural way. The heaviest blow of all, however, was the death of those who were consumed at the offering of incense, whose terrible end is constantly recalled to us by the covering of the altar, fashioned out of the brazen plates that came from the censers used by those unfortunate ones. But we bore all these blows, and even wish we had all perished simultaneously with them, instead of becoming victims to the tortures of death by thirst." At first they directed their reproaches against Moses alone, since Aaron, on account of his extraordinary love of peace and his kind-heartedness, was the favorite of the people. But once carried away by suffering and rage, they started to hurl their accusations against both of the brothers, saying, "Formerly your answers to us had always been that sorrows came upon us, and that God did not stand by us because there were sinful and godless men among us. And now that we are a congregation of the Lord, why have ye nevertheless led us to this poor place where there is not water, without which neither man nor beast can live? Why do not ye exhort God to have pity upon us, since the well of Miriam had vanished with her death? A righteous man regardeth the life of his beast." And the fact that these people, so near to death, still considered the sufferings of their beasts, shows that they were, notwithstanding their attitude toward Moses and Aaron, really pious men. And in truth, God did not take amiss their words against Moses and Aaron, for God holds no man accountable for that which he utters in distress. For the same reason neither Moses nor Aaron made reply to the accusations hurled against them, but hastened to the sanctuary to implore God's mercy for his people. They also considered that the holy place would shelter them in case the people meant to lay hands upon them. God actually did appear at once, and said to them, "Hasten from this place. My children die of thirst, and ye have nothing better to do than to mourn the death of an old woman." He then bade Moses to speak unto the rock that it may give forth water, but impressed upon them the command to bring forth neither honey nor oil out of the rock, but water only. This was to prove God's power, who can pour out of the rock not only such liquids as are contained in it, but water too, that never otherwise issues from a rock. He also ordered Moses to speak to the rock, but not to smite it with his rod. "For," said God, "the merits of them that sleep in the cave of Machpelah suffice to cause their children to receive water out of the rock." Moses then fetched out of the tabernacle the holy rod on which was the ineffable name of God, and accompanied by Aaron, betook himself to the rock to bring water out of it. On the way to the rock, all Israel followed him, halting at any rock by the way, fancying that they might fetch water out of it. The grumblers now went about inciting the people against Moses, saying, "Don't you know that the son of Amram had once been Jethro's shepherd, and all shepherds have knowledge of the places in the wilderness that are rich in water? Moses will now try to lead us to such a place where there is water, and then he will cheat us, and declare he had caused the water to flow out of a rock. If he actually is able to bring forth water out of rocks, then let him fetch it out of any one of the rocks upon which we fix." Moses could have easily done this, for God said to him, "Let them see the water flow out of the rock they have chosen." But when, on the way to the rock, he turned around and perceived that instead of following him, they stood about in groups around different rocks, each group around some rock favored by it, he commanded them to follow him to the rock upon which he had fixed. They, however, said, "We demand that thou bring us water out of the rock we have chosen, and if thou wilt not, we do not care to fetch water out of another rock." End of section. This recording is in the public domain.